I'm really excited because I brought like a bunch of my flower essences that I'm a big fan of. We're gonna have them at the master class too. I thought I would kind of bring some of mine to just share with everyone and be like, these are some of my favorites, some of the ones I'm using. I have been really looking forward to this conversation with you, Ashleigh, and I'm just so happy to have you on the podcast. I've been working with flower essences for over a year now, and honestly can't fully remember how. No, I got into them because of astrology. One of my astrology teachers was talking about certain flower essences, for certain signs. And that just, as a first line in human design, took me down the rabbit hole. And before I knew it, I was like buying way too many of them and then like needing a case to carry them in because it was just like excessive again, first line going down the rabbit hole. So I've really been looking forward to talking with someone about flower essences. And where I'd kind of like to kick off with is just to first begin with like, how did you come to flower essences? Like, what is your story with flower essences? What's the
I
romance behind this relationship?
love affair. Yes. And for me, it really is a love affair. I discovered flower essences, I like to say, in a most unusual way. And that is not in the way that we might expect. I didn't first read a book about it. No, I didn't find them on Facebook. I didn't find them in any of the conventional ways. I was 25 years old and I was navigating the conventional medical system. My dad, we were pretty sure he was in his late 50s. We were pretty sure that he was going to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's or something along those lines. So, and it would have been early onset, obviously, at that age. So I was busy navigating this conventional medical field, trying to get the doctor's appointments lined up, do all the things. And his family doctor, who, he had maybe seen him twice. It wasn't a long-term kind of relationship that they had. And he handed me a form. It had all kinds of mental health type resources. And obviously, when you're thinking about something like Alzheimer's, it very much is a chronic terminal diagnosis. They tell you that right from the get-go. There's nothing really you can do to cure, heal, fix, or otherwise resolve Alzheimer's. So I'm looking at this form, and it's just a list of things. It's literally probably printed off a dot matrix printer, even though this is fairly recent. This is 2008. And I'm looking at this form, and one of the things on this piece of paper was flower essences. And at the time, I remember thinking like, what the heck is this? Like, how's this going to help my dad's brain, right? This doesn't make any sense. And I kind of shelved it, didn't think too much about it. And I don't know how the next kind of iteration of that happened where I was reintroduced to them. But like you, having a one line in my profile means that I dove deep and I fell in love. And now, so many of the Bach essences I have a personal relationship with because, of course, they helped me through what one could arguably say is like the hardest time of your life, right? Especially as a caregiver. So I was a full-time caregiver for my dad. And it's so interesting that we can use these essences both for ourselves, we can use them for our families, we can use them for very young children. So that is one of my favorite things about essences, the lack of contraindications and the fact that we can really use them with people of all ages. And I just hope that people discover them from a young age so that they can really take advantage and use them in their life.
That's incredible. So how were they helpful to your father?
Yeah, so one of the ways that I use them, I mean, Rescue Remedy was kind of the first one that I ever bought, I ever used. I used that one for years without even understanding like what flowers were in it and what it did. And I just knew I felt better when I did it. And then, they have the drops that you can get or the little candy pellets kind of thing, and it's like, oh, stress relief. So I just use them that way. I gave them to him. Sometimes I'd get like little spray and I spray them in his room, just kind of like bring the energy down, right? Because you're dealing with a terminal diagnosis like that, and oftentimes there's behaviors that come up, there's medication contraindications, right? So medications can make us do crazy things, and you're really just living in a state of stress when you're 25 with no nervous system resilience. You're not sleeping properly, nobody your age knows what you're going through. And I've just got this little bottle of Rescue Remedy being like, I feel better. I should just take more of this. So it really is kind of a remarkable story that I just kept using them and obviously fell in love with them because I just felt so much better when I had them in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really blown away the first time. My stepmother, who's very much, I always wanted her to create like a little herbal book because
Ooh.
she's all about, you know, the herbal remedies, and it was just so cool what she would do. And I always saw her little uh remedy. What is it called? You talk about, it's like the yellow bottle.
Like the rescue remedy?
Yeah, the rescue remedy. I used to see that all the time.
Yeah.
And I never took it. So I never really connected with that one. But when I first started, and I started with the acrimony, which is
Oh.
the flower essence for Sagittarius.
Yeah.
And I started taking it, you know, before meeting with clients, before doing, you know, teaching, like those sorts of things. And I was just really amazed at how much more centered and kind of calming it made me feel. And then, you know, around that time as well, I was really struggling with my sleep. And so I was all about, you know, trying anything that was remotely related to like sleep. And white chestnut has just become my go-to, you know, like midlife, like, please, baby, please. I definitely take more drops than I probably should, but um
You could take the whole bottle, it would just be considered one dose. So
it's, you know, I mean, it's just like, okay. But I really came to love them. So before we kind of go any further and dive in, I'd love for you to just give us an overview on what flower essences are, because I think for a lot of people, they may or may not, like, I don't think a lot of people know about flower essences, you know? And so let's just, you know, create that foundation for them, and then we can nerd out.
yeah. So one of the things that I like to say is like the biggest difference between a flower essence and a herbal tincture is flower essences do not contain any physical plant matter. So when we make them, we are capturing the vibration of that actual flower, that plant, that mushroom, that environmental essence, if we're using environmental essences. And I like to think of flower essences really just as energized infusions. So it is water that has the frequency of this flower, this plant, and it's been captured. And it's part of that alchemy, that relationship between the sun and the plant itself, that this can happen. And I think that if people are kind of, this concept is foreign, or it feels like something that they may want to know more about, the work of Dr. Emoto is really cool to look at. And he really explored, capturing water that had had expressions, or they would say I love you and I hate you, and he would capture the water and freeze it and see that it actually contained a pattern, a vibration, a frequency. So this is how flower essence really are based on this premise.
So what about the naysayers who are like, oh, this is just a mental, you know,
Well,
like a
having the,
placebo effect?
yeah, I like to say I have no problem with placebo if it works. And the other thing is, of course, having a shared three line, we know that sometimes you just have to experience it and experiment for yourself. So if you don't believe in it, that's cool. I'm not here to convince you. I also say that if you're really struggling, you have stress, anxiety, tension, something's going on, start with Rescue Remedy. Just get that little yellow bottle, use it as often as you need to. Sometimes people will say, like, take it 3 to 4 times a day, 3 to 4 drops at a time. That's usually for something that's a little bit more chronic. But when we're in an acute scenario, we can take it as often as 5 minutes. You probably will only need to take it 2 or 3 times. I took it because I didn't have a lot on me when I got stranded in an elevator, and I was 6.5 months pregnant, and it was 7 o'clock in the morning and nobody was around. And I was like, what do I have on me? I only have flower essences. So I had to use what I had, and I was just drop, 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 and then the doors opened and I was able to escape.
Mm.
But those kind of scenarios that come up, someone hits your car, or I think of like a scenario where you're just getting groceries and like the bag falls out of your groceries. It's not something that's going to be life changing, but it's something that's stressful for people, and maybe your goods get all banged up and whatnot. But I like to say that's kind of a core essence that people would start with, and it's a blend of 5 flowers, so it covers a lot of scenarios around stress, anxiety, tension, and people can use it with pets too. So even if you don't personally believe, I don't feel like that placebo effect can really even come into play when you're talking about a pet, because the pet will either be better or they won't.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. I feel like, okay, I need to go get some.
Might already have all the essences to make it, so you just
I
have to show
might actually.
the
Yeah, I
rest.
have a lot. A bit excessive. I had to cut myself off
Well,
finally.
there's no limit. There's no limit. I mean, as long as I can fit it in my suitcase, then I'll probably bring it home.
Again, I think that, I mean, I don't know about you. We're both 1-3s profiles in human design. So we both have that first line running for us. But, it just, because I feel like I found the core ones that really work well for me, then it just became excessive to continue buying more. So I have
Well,
to
when
stay
those
away
ones
from the
run
sales.
out, right? When those ones run out, maybe you're like, oh, I need something else for intuition, or maybe I need something for heavy periods, or whatever, right? So there's, so many different uses that just come up as acute scenarios that, we might just want to use it for a little while, and then we're like, okay, that's good for now, and maybe we'll share it with a friend.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I didn't realize the difference was that flower essences don't have any actual components of
Yeah.
the flowers themselves. Um, and so this process is done with sunlight. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you have a bowl, a container, Dr. Bach typically recommended crystal, and on a cloudless day is really important. So no clouds in the sky, which these days is sometimes challenging, but and the other thing too is that you don't want to essentially lend your energetic imprint or your vibration to the flowers. So typically, I was always taught to cut the flowers with a pair of shears or scissors. Don't touch the flowers, and they drop onto the water, and then the sun. I like to use the word alchemy because the sun is doing its magical work with the flowers that are in the bowl, and then will remove the flowers, and then that water is essentially what we consider the energized infusion. You can use it as is, but typically for most of us, we want to capture, that'll be the mother tincture, and then we'll add a preservative to it. So the preservative ensures that it'll be good for years or until the next time we want to kind of freshen it up and just make another batch. But
Nice. Okay. So it's like creating moon water or,
yeah, yeah,
crystal waters or these sorts
yeah.
of things.
Yeah, and so you talk about crystal water. There are what I call gem essences or crystal essences, and they work similarly. So there are some crystals and gems that we can infuse themselves in the water. Obviously, you want to make sure that they're safe. There's no contraindications about, physically having the gem in contact with the water. Other times the gem is just suspended kind of close by or next to. There are also things called living essences where the flower, the plant, the tree is not cut. They're just kind of dipped into the water, so the
Hmm.
plant remains living. That's another type of essence. It's very rare. It's a kind of unusual way to make essences, but some of the makers of those products claim that they're more powerful. So it's interesting to think about the flower or the flower or the plant not having die, right? Like the energy is not dying. It's still fully alive when it's coming into contact with the water. So
Yeah, it's interesting. Have you noticed a difference between using those types of essences?
I haven't. I think that they might have some interesting applications when it comes to topical use. That's kind of the only time where I might think, oh, those might be worth because sometimes they're quite hefty in price. And like I said, they're more rare. So there's only one or two companies I know of that make all of their essences that way. And then, of course, we have things like environmental essences, which are not coming into contact with a plant, a tree, a gem. They're coming into contact with a place, an
Hmm.
environment. So if I find a cool waterfall, I might be like, oh, I want to capture the essence of this actual location. And then, of course, it comes down to how sensitive you are. If you're a channel, how you're sharing that information, right? Because how else? How else would we find out what that essence might be used for except from source and spirit?
That's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought about that. How would you capture a waterfall? Like
Well,
not just a waterfall, but yeah,
the place
yeah,
itself.
a
I mean,
place.
it's interesting, right? So in the same way that you might make moon water we're just going to use Pisces as an example, only because I find this really interesting. So I made a Pisces full moon essence about 2 years ago. And I remember thinking like, oh, I wonder what this could be used for. I wonder, didn't think too much of it. I have the mother tincture. I've made a dosage bottle. But I also use frequency technology. So a lot of the remedies that I use, they've all been inputted into the system, and I can scan the body and basically match up what someone energetically might need based on those remedies. So as you can imagine, I have thousands of remedies in there now. And so it's interesting to me that when we are physically, as humans, experience a Pisces full moon, for example, the Pisces full moon essence comes up. Like you can't, like, how is this thing that I made on one night, 2 years ago, it was a powerful Pisces full moon. And the flip side is that when it comes up for the Scorpio full moon, right? Because that's the, no, that's not.
Balance.
What's the flip side of Pisces? It's not Scorpio.
Virgo.
Virgo, thank you. I was like Taurus and Scorpio, but yeah, Virgo full moon, it'll also come up because that is the full imbalance, or that's the full balance of it, right? If the Pisces energies are too much out of alignment, then so it's interesting to use environmental essences that way. And yeah, it really, I mean, you can call on the energetics of the environment, you can call on nature spirits, we're really kind of like getting out there, circumstances like that, but I
It's
feel like
what
this.
I like to do.
But absolutely, I mean, the kind of core aspect of this, and something to keep in mind if making an essence is something that is interesting to you, is that your intention is most important.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the
really
intention is
clear,
always key.
yeah, and just kind of being open, receptive, surrendering to whatever energy wants to come in. And also you can think of like making essences where you might have a flower essence and then you get a bug or something ends up in it. And so that obviously is going to affect the energetics of it too, right? Some people have sent me a message being like, I made this essence and it had a bee in it. Should I toss it or should I? And it depends on whether or not they're using it, based on classical indications, or if they're really making a custom essence that nobody in the world up until that point has maybe experienced. So it's open to exploration.
That's so interesting. Yeah, there's on one of the podcasts I listened to, one of the hosts, him and his wife, they make all of these different, they do oils and not necessarily, I think maybe some essences, but like candles, but like all these things with like certain like astrological elections. And so it feels like that's what they're doing, is like they're taking the energy and then they're incorporating it into these things. And people love these products, man. Like they sell out every single month when they go live. It's really cool. Um, awesome. Okay, so how do flower essences work in our bodies?
Well, we should have just started with the hardest question first. There are a couple perspectives on that. So one of the perspectives that I really like is that they really just support our nervous system. So, this idea of like having frayed nerves, and the flower essence literally just kind of melds things together. Whether those nerves become less frayed or the nerves themselves are able to regenerate and rebuild. If we think of science and neuroplasticity, I mean, clearly this is happening all the time. There really is no end to how nerves might regenerate or rebuild. And only because spirit is kind of saying like, hey, don't forget about me. Comfrey flower essence is amazing for nervous system resilience, just kind of as an intro flower essence that people might want to explore. And in particularly, it helps blend and bring together the left and right hemispheres of the brain. I have a great video on YouTube if people want to hear more about the comfrey flower essence. So that's one of the ways that it works. Other people come at it from the perspective of maybe chakras, right? So the Ayurvedic practice of chakras, and we can think about them as working specifically on energy bodies, right? So you look at the color of a plant, a flower, you can see like, oh, goldenrod, for example, is a bright yellow, and it stands to reason. Perhaps it helps support the solar plexus and all those aspects around self-worth and self-esteem and really stepping into your power, right? So that's another way to kind of think about how essences might work on the body. And also, I think one of the important principles that kind of might get lost or people might not necessarily think of is that flower essences, first and foremost, and I'm going to say flower essences, but of course I mean all vibrational essences, have this ability to work on the body in whatever way they need to. So it's helping to find balance, number one. And it's also just allowing the body to kind of shift and move out of an energy state. So anybody who maybe has ever smudged in their house, or maybe they've just decluttered, whether or not they've just opened the windows on a cold snowy day, just to feel that influx, even the energy change after the rain falls, right? Like, just we want to be part of that. It's a neat way of seeing like how things shift in the body. And I just find that really interesting because we can really rely on these as like an everyday tool. The other thing that I want to mention is that for the most part, vibrational essences work on this aspect of the emotions. So they're largely known as an emotional and mental tool. And of course, then people will ask me, well, how do I work on the physical body? How do I work on the physical health, right? My background's, having a clinical practice where I work with people who legitimately have physical health complaints. And it's interesting because, of course, when we start to clear, and you know this, of course, from the Akashic Records, but when we start to clear those emotional patterns, we start to move some of that stuff out of our field, physical health issues, they either resolve themselves or they turn into something else, they become downgraded. It's part of that kind of trauma recovery, nervous system resilience. So that's another way that it's important to think about flower essences, is not necessarily from the perspective of physical health, but also from the perspective of emotional health. So what's underlying it, right? So even agrimony you mentioned, right? A perfect example is like, perhaps we've been wearing a mask at times, like perhaps we've not been showing up as our full self. We might have been putting on a face for people, and it's a perfect one of just like, hey, I feel safe, comfortable to be myself and to be authentically myself. And how much does that change everything else in your life, right? Once you have that authenticity and power to be able to step forward. So it's a perfect, just because that one jumped into my mind because you mentioned it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I too love that one.
Well, the plight of the Sagittarius is like we often feel the need to like lighten up every single space that we step
Yes,
into. And that's not always our role,
yes.
and while that part of myself I think is wonderful when I'm teaching,
Yeah.
I also need to be grounded.
I like
um
that aspect of throwing fun into it too, though. I don't have a lot of Sag in my chart, but I'm an Aries, and definitely like that fire sign of, you want people to be able to learn in an environment that feels fun and comfortable, and flower essences can help us do that, and they can kind of like just make life a little bit easier.
Yeah, for sure. It's as a Sag, and I'm like a quadruple Sag. So like I'm a lot of Sag. So girls just want to have fun is kind of the theme song of my brain,
I love
which is great. But like I have a business, I have to make money, I have to pay my bills.
Girls got bills. Girls Gone Wild got bills.
Girls gotta pay her bills.
That's right.
Um, so I would love to know, because we just wrapped up in the Soldier Brain Collective last month. I told you we had done a master class on the root chakra. So I have to ask what some good flower essences for the root chakra are. At least one. At
I
least
love
one.
it. Well, for the root chakra, I always, always, always would recommend gem essences. And one of the reasons that I would recommend gem essences is because they're just naturally stabilizing and grounding. So
Hmm.
next to gem essences, any of the tree essences are going to have that similar energy. But if you just think of what a rock is, right? Think of what a
Yeah.
gem, a crystal is, it's like the most 3D we could possibly be, right? The energy is moving so slowly. Some of us who would prefer to live in those upper chakras would almost find it too slow, but that's exactly what we need in order to be open, to be receptive, to be able to access some of that information that maybe we want to access, and feeling safe, grounded, feeling able to access abundance too, all of those aspects around the root chakra. So all of the gems I love. One of my favorite kind of combos is a combination of smoky quartz, rutile, and black tourmaline. And so of
Oh,
course black tourmaline is being a really high vibrational protective energy, and it also really helps kind of make boundaries and help support us against external stressors, right? So this could be people, it could be places, it could be all of these aspects. I
yeah.
just love, yeah. And the
I
one
love
thing I'll
all those stones so
add,
much.
you can make any custom blend more stabilizing, more grounding just by adding one or two gem essences. So if you're making a custom blend, like I do a lot of custom blends on my site. So if you've got 4 or 5 flower essences in there and you're like, I really just need something to kind of bring these energies back into the body, right? Part of what gem essences do is it brings us back into the body, which of course we have to do that, starting with the root chakra, just to add 1 or 2 gem essences to whatever custom blend you're making. And that's kind of almost I would say it's like must have, must do at this point. Like I won't even make a blend unless it has one or two gem essences in it because we need that stabilizing aspect. And so many of the flowers take us to the higher realms, take us,
Mm,
higher upper chakras, take us out of our
mm,
bodies. And so people want to astral travel and they want to do all this like spiritual development work. And I'm like, but are you grounded? Because if you're not grounded, you can open yourself up to energies that you perhaps don't have the experience of being able to connect with, and also you might get yourself into some trouble.
yeah. We did cover that in the master class for sure. Well, being able to, I always tell folks it's like, it's not like you can't access the spiritual world when your root chakra isn't balanced but doing it from a grounded place is such a different experience, and I constantly see with clients and students alike, the people who struggle the most with really connecting in a clear way to the spiritual world, to their intuition, are those who really struggle with their root chakra,
Mm.
whose root chakra is very imbalanced. And when we start there and we really focus there, then it really allows us to go up into those spaces in such a completely different way. So that's awesome.
And they themselves might not be fully embodied, right? So like a lot of times people will come to flower essences, like white chestnut's a perfect example, right? Monkey mind, anxious, repetitive, like my mind's going a million miles an hour. And what they most need to do is like meditate, come back to their body, go for a walk, drink some water. Literally, they just like lie on the on the grass and play dead, right? So
Yeah.
it's like what you don't need to connect to the spiritual aspect if you're not even feeling safe and comfortable in your body, right? And one of the ways that they do that is obviously by kind of nurturing that root chakra, which is helps them feel comfortable and safe. Because
Yes.
we
Yes.
experience the spiritual world, right? Like how often have you thought about the fact that the spiritual world can only be experienced through this body? If we didn't have this body, well, we're not really having a spiritual experience, are we?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, our body is our intuitive gift, period. Like it's our tool. So if we're not in our body, then we're really going to struggle with that experience and have a difficult time connecting and getting clear information and staying safe and all of the things.
And what's one of the things that happens most of all when we experience any kind of trauma or stress, right? Like we're out of our body or we're slightly outside of our body or our energy field is just not matching up with our body. How many people come and they're like, I've kind of had a soul crisis or a disassociation or something along those lines. And it's like trauma has pushed you out of that. So what's a great way to come back to it is flower essences, right?
Yes, 100%. And for everyone who's tuning in, Ashleigh is our guest practitioner this month, our very first guest practitioner in the Soul German Collective. And she is teaching flower essences for abundant living, right? I got that right? Yeah. Which I'm really excited about. We'll talk about more towards the end of the podcast. But if you are a paid member within the community, then it's free for you, but you can also join outside. And obviously Ashleigh's she's got the goods, so I'm so excited for this workshop. Okay, I have a ton of more questions and like not a ton of time, so so why should well, first of all, I wanted to talk about why flower essences are a perfect medication for sensitive souls. You mentioned this when we kind of connected, and I'm very neurodivergent. I have a lot of clients who have autistic children. I would love to hear your perspectives on this, and just kind of, maybe that's not the definition of sensitive souls to you, but I was just,
To me,
I get a
yeah.
lot of thoughts around that. So
I think, yeah, I mean, I would use those interchangeably personally, sensitive soul, empath. And it's funny because after Rescue Remedy, the first essence that I bought was a yarrow essence. So again, another essence that has like a pure place in my heart because it helps protect us against all those external influences, right? So it's not a question
what's
of
it
being
called? Sorry, what kind of
yarrow,
essence?
yarrow, as some people say. I say yarrow
Yarrow.
because
Okay.
Canadian.
No, you're fine. Yarrow's kind of a weird name anyway.
Yeah, and it has such a delicious smell too. Chances are you've probably seen the garden or around your place, and you can just rub it in your hands, and it just smells so. I just love that smell. I find it really intoxicating. And there's different types of yarrow too. So it comes in a white, which is typically what I'm talking about for, psychic, energetic protection. There's a pink yarrow that's specifically for empaths and people who are sensitive to other people, people pleasing, and kind of, performing in a way that wouldn't be your natural way of performing. And there's also a yellow type. So yarrow is an amazing essence for people who are more sensitive and more kind of exposed to those things. Because, yeah, it's true. We kind of mentioned like, how do we become more sensitive? Because I find a lot of clients come to me saying, I want to connect to my spirit and I want to connect to inner guidance. So they're wanting to be more sensitive, where, some of us perhaps are more sensitive to all of those external aspects. And yeah, I absolutely think I have you mentioned autistic kids. So I have a great class on resilient families. Really, it's about how to make the entire family, whether or not school issues or family issues, and that's all free on YouTube. And it's an amazing way of just kind of getting to know some of the essences that you might use in your family. And so, great option for kids who are, as you said, neurodivergent and, more exposed to, the brain working differently. Comfrey is another one that I would absolutely include in that too.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I just think that I know my personal experience of the everyday world, and I'm like one of those people who's kind of on the spectrum. And, like I joke, but it's true that like if I'm outside and a fire truck drives by, it just shuts me down. I can't
Yeah.
even handle it. And it takes me a bit to recover from it. That hypersensitivity to the world is really difficult. Noise canceling headphones are my
Yes.
favorite.
I was just to say, and I do the little like earplug type things, and it depends. Some people are more sensitive, like you and I probably are more sensitive to the clear, or to the, I was going to say to the clear audience, but that kind of dovetails nicely. It's that external sounds, external noises, but then that also allows us to open up to those gifts, right? So
Yeah.
that's the other thing, is that if you're neurodivergent in specific ways, you might find that there's a parallel between the intuitive information that you're receiving and then how that shows up for you in terms of sensitivity. So you're not necessarily muting it, you're just kind of deciding when and how you access it, which I think is an important kind of distinction.
So the ways that flower essences work with it then are that they kind of bring it down to more of a manageable level. Was that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it can work both ways, right? Number one, what flower essences, gem essences, environmental essences are trying to do is to bring the body back into harmony, but have the body bring back into a sense of balance. So that means optimal physical health, optimal emotional health, optimal mental health, and ideally for many of us, optimal spiritual health. So some people might want to increase that sensitivity. Other people are obviously going to want to tune it down. So you would use specific essences to obviously achieve that purpose, right? So if you're a sensitive soul, yarrow might be a good one to use. For someone who's more, kind of desensitized, right? And oftentimes that's due to nervous system trauma, stress, recovery, right? If you can kind of clear some of those patterns, those people just naturally become more intuitive and connected because they feel safe. And when we feel safe, we're able to receive and access that information. So sometimes it's a little bit of it's a journey, right? I call a lot of the work that I do like flower essence journeys, right? So it might be working with one particular flower, you might be working with a blend of three. I've had times in the past where I might work with like three or four, and I'm just using them kind of alternate days and see what comes up and what I feel most guided to introduce into my energy field.
Interesting. So do you think that, especially for the folks who, because I work with quite a few clients who, really have really live in their mind, right? And versus their heart. They have a very strong ego, right? Because they've gone through some pretty traumatic things as a younger child. And so they are a lot more desensitized.
Yeah.
So the processes that would be in regards to working with them, is there does it take a long period of time for these flower essences to work with them? Like, what is your I know it's like a big question.
It's like anything, right? It's like, how long does it take to get healthy? That's the question that you're asking me, right? So it
I
depends.
don't know what I'm asking.
That's how I interpret it. How long does it take to get healthy, right? How many sessions, as people will say, how many sessions do we need to do before I start to feel better? Well, you might start to feel better right away. I mean, my goal is obviously to match people up with a flower essence or blend that's going to help them feel better right away. whether or not they're working on something acute, right? Because sometimes people are showing up with a very specific, like, I can't, well, I mean, perfect example is you mentioning white chestnut, right? I can't fall asleep at night. I need to be able to sleep. I can't do anything else in my life if I'm not sleeping. Other people might show up with a more chronic condition. We might be thinking about blood sugar imbalance or hormone imbalance, right? Chances are it's not going to be one. It can happen, but chances are it won't be one single flower essence that suddenly I'm going from diabetic or pre-diabetic to no longer, that even being an issue in my life, right? So that is more of a chronic pattern, right? And even if we think about the emotional patterns, connections between physical health complaints and the emotions, you think about diabetes, it's like we've lost the joy or the pleasure or the love of life. So it might take a little bit of a journey to figure out like what's really underlying that. Like, why is that? Is that because of childhood patterning? Is that limiting beliefs? Is it something that I brought in from a past life, if people believe in that, right? So lots of ways that we can start to use these as really like practical tools. That's what I love about them. They're really practical tools. They sound very esoteric. The way that they're made is certainly like there's the sun and the water and then it's yeah. But they really are practical tools and we can use them in a really practical way, which really suits, as I was mentioning earlier, like just this aspect of like practicality and being able to use them as part of our daily routines.
There's that Capricorn moon.
Exactly. I was going to mention that. Exactly. Yeah, there has to be a logistical way of us actually using this as part of our day-to-day life.
Yeah, for sure. I say all the time, it's like I love all the unicorns and butterflies, but if it's not changing my life, I don't have any use for it,
Exactly.
And I don't believe in spending time and resources on these types of things if they're not, again, giving us legitimate, like practical changes, and really assisting that process. So what are some of your like current favorites
Ooh,
and
that's a good question.
why?
And I was just going to say that sometimes, like the essences that we're choosing, like if we're only limited to one system, right? So if we only use Bach essences, for example, like he did 38 essences. So it's like if your complaint or your issue doesn't fall within those 38, then, you might not be getting the relief that you need because you're trying to kind of match up within this framework. And other people would argue Bach essences do everything you need. You don't possibly need everything else. But the three line in me wants to experiment and try and, be exposed to different things. So some of my current favorites, I brought a couple here. I really love, what am I going to show you?
And for
Um,
everyone who's tuning in, you can also watch this on YouTube if you would like to.
you can see some of the one of the ones that I have on my desk right now is Mariposa Lily, which is this beautiful essence for women's health and divine feminine and really just connecting to that, womanly feminine aspects of ourselves. It also connects us deeply to our mother, whether or not that relationship was a good one or not necessarily a
Hmm.
good. So that is one. You're like, I'm saying so much and at the same time so little. I feel like sometimes that's an essence that we might need. Another essence that I love, let's see, what else can I share? Wild oat is another, I'll call it like a perennial favorite, one that I use all the time
Wild
for,
oat.
yeah, wild oat. Yeah,
I think I
wild
have
oat.
that one in my stash.
Mission, purpose. The thing is that sometimes that it's like, oh, the indications suit me, right? Like what I'm trying to do is like connect to that aspect, but it's also one that you will have to use over a long, long time, right? So it's like more of a chronic essence, right? So people are like, oh, I thought I was going to take it today, and like by Friday, I'd absolutely know what my life's mission is or purposes, right? And like, why didn't it happen so fast? And it's like, oh, maybe you need to peel back those limiting beliefs about really stepping into your power and your self-trust and, doing away with some of that self-doubt that's keeping you from doing the work that you're meant to do, but you just don't have the, kind of confidence and courage to step forward with it.
Yeah.
Speaking of confidence and courage, another one that I feel like people would benefit from all the time is borage. And that is one.
Borage?
Borage, yeah. Have you seen that one before?
I don't think so. Although the name sounds familiar, but
Like a little blue flower. If you kind of pull off the flowers, it tastes like cucumber a little bit.
huh.
It's one you can grow in the garden. I like to think of that one as like giving me the ability to do hard things. It's like the superhero cape, and it's like kind of
Mm.
throwing off like the confidence, courage for, a podcast or presentation. You have to show up publicly. That's a perfect one to take. I love that one. Um, how about a gem essence? Let's think if I have one kind of top of mind. Sapphire is a nice one. And it depends on what company you use, right? So different companies can have different indications for the same essence based on what their kind of research has shown. A lot of people will test what an essence does before they make it available to the public. So then like the indication is pretty solid. But I mean, again, it can work in a totally different way than you're expecting. Just because the bottle says it's supposed to work on XYZ, your body might have a different priority, right? So always listen to the body. Ultimately, that's going to make the decision. But this essence that I'm particularly referring to is the one that Alaskan Essences makes. And I'll say also, so that really good for intuitive guidance or really connecting to source, really allowing us to kind of, get over some of those self-doubt of connecting to those intuitive messages. But the
Mm.
interesting thing is that, and I haven't talked about, brands so much, but how the types of flowers that are grown by a particular brand can sometimes, resonate really well with our energy field or perhaps not as much. So like I work with desert essences, for example. I don't have any personal experience other than, having done my training down there of being in a desert location and being exposed to and surrounded by desert plants. But if you, for example, live in Mexico, you would have much more familiarity with plants. So I think that also our own kind of energy field, our own personal temperature can be impacted. So I think of Alaskan essences because, of course, being Canadian, I am used to the cold, cold weather. And of course, your experience in Colorado, I mean, flowers that grow there are going to be, you know, flowers that are probably going to be helpful for you at this part and this aspect of your life.
That's a good tip. So just to clarify, so people so I'm sure that folks heard that is to think about the flowers that are in their environment, right? That are like local to them and maybe like their city, state, country, or yeah, state probably, maybe even
Yeah.
country, right? Or was that too wide of a area?
Well, it depends on the country, right? You think of a place that maybe is a little bit smaller,
Yeah, I'm
like
in the US, so
Tennessee
I'm
or
like, well,
like the US has its own climates and temperatures and environments, but absolutely, and it's one of the reasons why I produce a lot of essences that are not found elsewhere. So they are wildflowers, they are essences that are really growing in this natural environment. And one of the things that I love about that is that a lot of people would call them weeds. Well, what does a weed do? The weed has ultimate resilience, right? A weed is growing in places that, nothing else can grow. A dandelion that's coming up through a
I
crack in
love
the sidewalk.
dandelion. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what are these, kind of essences doing when they work on our energy field is that, extra oomph and energy. And that's what has been my experience, at least with the wildflowers that I work with, is that their power tends to surpass an essence that you might buy off the store that has been flown 2,000 miles from home, right?
It makes complete sense. I mean, it's very similar to food, right? When we get locally grown food versus food that's from a completely different country, the energetic imprint of that is completely different in our body, you know. And it just, again, it goes all back to energy, and a local energy is going to be much more helpful. So I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
I feel like, because I mean, I just moved to Colorado earlier this year, and I've had a very difficult time kind of settling in, and the heat has played a big role in that. Um, but I think it'd be cool to look into, some local flower essences and just kind of feel into what might be of assistance, from that in that regard. So
And don't be
speaking,
afraid to try different brands, right? So
right,
if you
right.
try a brand, sometimes people say, oh, that brand didn't work for me or that essence didn't work for me. Well, it might have been the energetics of the person, the producer, the practitioner that made that. And then, yeah, feel free to try another brand, right? Ultimately, we want to have you kind of want to feel it quickly in your energy field. So if you've been using something for 3 weeks and you have no effect, chances are it's probably not the frequency or the remedy that you need right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like, I mean, at least for me and my use with flower essences has been very much, um, I mean, the ones that I've purchased intuitively, and I definitely feel a bit of a shift when I take them. Maybe not immediately, but like within the first couple of days for sure, in regards to something. Um, and white chestnut, again, I mean, I take it every freaking night. Like that's just
I love it. It's a
it's
go-to.
part.
There's
part
a
part of it.
They make a rescue sleep blend, which is similar to the rescue remedy, but the sleep blend is like in the little tablets. You could just take one little. Yeah, I used to swear by it. I just
I
love it.
tried them, and honestly, the white chestnut just did better for me.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
so you might be one of those people that just needs that single remedy, and it needs to be matched to your energy field. And yeah,
Probably because I'm squirting a whole lot in my mouth too.
that's true. That's true. Maybe there wasn't enough in that tiny capsule. Your body's like, I kind of feel like I know what the message is, right? Because ultimately, like when we're thinking about these plants, these remedies, they're on some level medicines, but they really are messages more than anything. And it's a message from the plant to us, or it's a message from the gem to us. And it's the body's responsibility to kind of like sort out what that does or how that feels in the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Messages. Like, oh,
Yeah,
hey,
I love the white chestnut. It spoke right to the adrenals. It was like, calm
I
down, guys. It's time for bed.
love it. So
Um,
true, right? And we keep our adrenals happy and we keep our root chakra happy. It's win-win.
exactly, exactly. So just to kind of bring things to a head here, first of all, because I do want to talk about the masterclass a little bit, so that you can kind of share with folks what we're going to be doing, which I'm so freaking excited about it. But um, also, like, I know that you work with people in a variety of ways. And so I'm sure everyone who's tuned in is, like I mentioned before, we start recording, like they're in love with you now. They're like, Ashleigh.
We need
So
more. We need more.
there might be a 2.0. We'll just see.
Love it.
Um, let's like share with the audience how they can connect with you, and then what are some ways that they can work with you.
Yeah, so perfect because we haven't talked about how to use flower essences. So I feel like this is a perfect way for people to actually learn how to use them physically on the body, topically, orally, like all the different ways. I have an amazing free guide. It's like an electronic guide, spiritual and practical ways to use these essences, how we might use them in an environment, how we might use them like in a room spray or something along those lines. So I have this amazing free guide. Highly recommend. Even if you think you know everything about flower essences or you don't know anything about flower essences, perfect guide for that. I also have a number of recorded webinars, workshops, are really kind of similar to what we do today, but focusing on a particular health complaint issue topic. So pregnancy, birth, postpartum. I work specifically ADHD, health and well-being. I have another one that's coming very soon on intuition, grief and loss, like a lot of these kind of major topics that we're talking about. So recorded webinars and workshops are great. And then I also work with people one-on-one, obviously. So I do what I call flower essence journeys. It's a way of just talking, chatting, figuring out what people need, developing a custom blend. It gets shipped to them. They experiment, they try it, they learn all the things, and then we do, follow up and see how they're doing. And do you need another blend or do you need to try something else? So this is a great way of like having that interactive aspect. If you've been using essences and perhaps they haven't worked, or you just want to try something new, or you've got, a chronic or a hard case and really, the thing that I hear most often is not, oh, your essences, they're like not working for me. Most of the time it's because they're so powerful that people kind of, they need to take them less often, right? So the
Mm,
typical way is like 3 to 4 times a day, 3 to 4 drops a day, and you might only take them twice a day, and like that's all your body needs. So that is a really neat way of when it's custom, then it's like specifically, ideally what your body needs and what your body is asking for. That it's sending out the message saying this is what I need. Now find me the flowers and the gems that are going to perfectly balance this particular situation or circumstance.
I love that. I love that. So, and you have, like you mentioned, you have a YouTube as well. What is your website? Are all your links on your website or?
Yeah, everything's on my website. I'm not on YouTube as often as I would like to be on Instagram more than anything, and I love sharing things on Pinterest. Great way to like really just maximize your flower essence education. And my website is www.innerplantwisdom.com.
I love that name.
Thank
Inner
you.
Plant Wisdom.
Our own inner wisdom, right? Which when I came up with the name, I didn't even realize actually is, kind of a synonym for intuition. It's our inner wisdom, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay, perfect. So let's just talk about the masterclass real quick here to just kind of summarize everything. The masterclass we are hosting it on the 29th of this month at 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, which is 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is not a masterclass that you have to attend live, so you can get the replay and all the resources and everything like that. It'll be sent out within 24 hours. But Ashleigh is going to be taking us through. Yeah, I'll
We're going to
share
be
with us.
diving in deep, right? We're going to be diving into, some of the things that we talked about today, but really in a more advanced and a more holistic and really impactful way, thinking about the root chakra. And really when we're thinking about, kind of the topic of this, it's flower essences, all essences really, but flower essences for abundant living. So abundance, prosperity consciousness, really tapping into like how do we access and manifest more of what we want to achieve. So working on our goals, our dreams. I think manifestation is going to end up being a big part of it. And at the same time, we're going to be talking about some of the essences that can kind of help clear some of those blocks, right? So if you're one of those people that's like, I have a self-worth block, I have a self-esteem block, I have a poverty consciousness block, we're going to be talking about some of the essences that can help clear that. And what's really cool is that we're going to have a guided energy clearing, activation, attunement with some of these essences that we can use to really activate people's abundance. So, I mean, the goal is obviously you get so much value for this masterclass, but at the same time that you're literally like activating your own abundance. It's your own abundance activation by way of the plant kingdom and the crystal kingdom, and then the other essences that kind of intuitively show up as being ready to participate and lead their guide. So that'll be the kind of interactive aspect, and we'll probably end on that because it's a great way of just really getting a full body energy treatment.
Yeah, I can't wait. It was so funny because when you were like, so the goal really, and my brain's like, that you're gonna win the lottery afterwards.
Spirit sending you a message.
That's where my brain went.
That's right. That's right. That's what. But yes. I mean, they're all aspects of being able to experience abundance in that way. But the other
My
thing that
brain's
I think
just being
is
silly.
cool,
I don't even play the lottery, but whatever.
well, how are you going to win if you can't play, right?
I know.
Um, but thinking about kind of like the way that this activation is going to happen, I also want to say like it's great for beginners, right? So if people are coming to flower essences and are like, this is totally foreign to me, I don't meditate, I don't do any of those things, it obviously helps if you meditate because that allows you to kind of connect to that intuitive aspect, really have some self-trust in the messages that you're receiving, but you don't need to have that. I do this energy healing clearing with people who have no experience with that. And I just recommend that people kind of trust and tune into that, and you'll just be amazed at some of the messages and guidance that are going to come through as a result of this. So
Yeah.
lots of abundance to come.
Oh yeah. My audience they are very hip to the
Hip to all the things.
they
Just
they
like us.
love actions and the meditations and we'll be
Codes,
going
quantum
deep.
codes, any
Bring
quantum
it
lover.
on.
Yeah.
All right, Miss Ashleigh, is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we
Um,
kind of close things
I
down?
just love the idea of people trying flower essences for the first time and really, give it your best shot and find an essence that you feel like is a good match for you. And if not, then like send me a message and say, this is what I'm trying to do and what do you recommend? And yeah, I'm always like, I feel like I'm more than anything a resource for people and really allowing people to kind of like tap into that aspect of self-empowerment. And my number one goal is never ever to be the person that's like doing the healing. I want to really empower people and really initiate people into nurturing their own self-healing. So it really is about, we start to do some of this work on ourselves. We work on ourselves first, and then eventually we can help other people.
Yes, yes. That is That is why you are here. This is why you are so perfect. Well, Ashleigh, thank you so much for being here today and, just sharing your knowledge and experience with us. This has been so fun. I feel like and again, I mean, I didn't get to half of my questions, of course, per usual. So we might have to have a 2.0, but very much looking forward to the masterclass, and just thank you. Thank you so much for your work and your contribution and your beautiful energy. It's been such a pleasure.
Yay. And I love to be able to connect with the plans. So I'm happy to be here too and to be able to kind of help offer them as a gift.
Yes, absolutely. All right, folks, thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for sharing your time with us. We so appreciate it. Be sure to share this episode with someone else who can benefit from it. Make sure to join the Soul Driven Collective, get on the email list, all of the fun things, and take care of yourselves. Do not forget, when we invest in ourselves, the world benefits. Until next time.